Hello out there, and welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Interesting show tonight, folks. Mr. James Shaffer Tien is joining us on the line from Dao Holistic Wellness. Going to be talking to us about holistic wellness and all the facets thereof. Sitting in the hot seat riding the co-host train with me tonight is Mr. Jeff Cote, the Occidental Taoist himself. Jeff, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing awesome, Matt. I'm really looking forward to being able to have a little chat with a fellow conspirator in Taoism and Taoist thought. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. James, welcome to the show. It's your first time, so thanks for being on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So another wonderful referral from Mr. Shurfu Koryaga himself. He said, hey, you got to talk to this guy. He's got, some really interesting information on health, because I do a lot with diet and stuff like that. Jeff and I have done several podcasts and with Shurfu himself. So he thought you'd be a great fit here to kind of come on and talk to us about your philosophy, what you do, and so we can kind of get to know you. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of walk us through sort of your path to what sort of inspired you to head this direction and why this became a passion for you.
So I was about 16, probably. I was in the end of high school, and I had been just introduced to Buddhism and psychology, and it was really my first time ever kind of looking at the mind itself. And from there, I had a curiosity about Qigong, and I took a class with a friend of my mother's, and he basically allowed me to feel my own Qi. He was kind of the gateway for that experience, which kind of began like a magnetism between the hands and various exercises. And it kind of convinced me that there was definitely something real to it. So I went to a university in Boulder, Colorado. It was called Naropa University. It was founded from a Tibetan Buddhist lineage. And I focused on the traditional Eastern arts there, which was concentration Tai Chi Chuan for me. And I did about 4 years of Tai Chi. It's in the Yang style, Cheng Manqing lineage.
Nice.
And I also just wanted to do energy work like Reiki and living without medicine, trying to get better with least intervention possible and live a balanced, long, healthy life.
So when you say living without medicine, you're talking in the context of traditional Western medicine? Or do you consider food and things like that to also be medicine?
Mostly without pharmaceuticals is what I mean.
Okay, understood. Go ahead, sorry.
And also just a diet that doesn't require much supplementation.
Well, I'm a supplement machine, man. I live on supplements.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, I did that
powders.
for a while.
Mostly it's protein powders because I can't find a way to get enough protein into a day's worth of meals without it, unfortunately. So yeah, so do tell.
Oh, I don't really think there's anything wrong with supplements. It's just kind of a knowledge thing. You got to know what they do. Got to use them correctly.
I definitely, I guess, live a better quality of life from what I supplement. Like I supplement fish oil and things like that I just normally wouldn't pick up in my normal course of eating. So I feel better because of it, for certain. Yeah, I mean, obviously, though, I think the rule of thumb is always to trade up, right? So if you can get it always get it from the original source first kind of thing. Is that sort of the philosophy?
Right, yeah. The highest goal when you're following a Taoist path is ultimately to subsist off the Tao itself. You don't require any food at all. And that's sort of a transformation that I think is possible, even though it sounds kind of beyond what most people think would be possible.
It's interesting you bring that up because when along my own path of following the Tao, I've come across various accounts of Taoists that have done just that. There's well, she's passed away now because she was like 117, I think, when I came across her story in China. But she was the abbess of a temple, and she had been living on like one single orange like every 9 months or something, and then water, and that was pretty much the only thing she'd been. That meditation, of course, and it was pretty remarkable. I mean, like I said, she was like 117 at the time, and it was remarkable to see that. And I saw her in a documentary as well as having heard the story from one of my teachers. I kind of sought her out in terms of like information about her, and after I heard the story, and I caught her on a documentary. I'm trying to remember who was it that did the documentary. He did the Mystery of Qi documentary. I'm trying to remember his name. I'll think of it at some point.
So yeah, I've heard this before too. That like what we consider a normal caloric intake for a diet is like what's it? It's 2,000 calories a day or something like that is what's considered normal. But
Right.
you can go around the world and there's societies that live on significantly lower calories than that per day, and do so well into what we'd consider to be elderly ages, right?
Yeah, I think the caloric model has a lot of flaws with it. I think there's a lot of flexibility and adaptability in people. And this calorie model is really reflective of Western science and this sort of linear exchange. It's like how we use cars, how we use fuel in cars. It's just like a burning up equivalency to an amount of energy. It doesn't
Yeah, it's very
have
clinical.
dynamism.
Yeah, you're right. It's very clinical how it's like it's looked at like the first law of thermodynamics kind of thing.
Right.
It's looked at very clinically that way.
Well, it's interesting that you bring in that idea of the laws of thermodynamics as part of this. I mean, it's certainly when you're talking about calories, you're definitely talking about thermodynamics, anyways. But I think that there's something to be said for other energy models as well. And how energy can be utilized more efficiently. I think one of the hallmarks of Taoism, and James probably, he has discovered this too, I'm certain, is that efficiency. Like in my own studies of Tai Chi, when you're less is more. When you truly understand how to do nothing, to follow Wu Wei, then energy sources are available to you that you're not necessarily drawing from within. I mean, you kind of are, but it's not like your body's resources.
Right.
It's you're tapping a larger web that you're part of.
Okay. Is this James?
Right.
Is this where the chi part of it kind of comes into the equation? Then is like what Jeff's talking about is when you connect into that external source, so to speak.
Well, I think the body is yin and yang, and the various cells and organelles and the matter they build themselves out of, I think there could be greater awareness inside your biochemistry that makes you pick and choose the molecules better. It's not just like stuffing yourself. It's like very tailored to your own energy, your own constitution.
Okay. Well, that's sort of like that concept in Western medicine where if you believe you're sick, you tend to become sick, and if you believe you're healthy, you tend to become healthy. Sort of idea, right? Like that. We know that there's that mind-body connection there. that if someone's depressed, the chances of them recovering is less than if you can help someone stay, keep their spirits up and things like that, right? And is that the connection you're kind of talking about? Is how that mind body connection works?
I think that's definitely a good case for the existence of vitality, that we're not just these matter machines. There is some sort of living force that you can work with and adjust its quality.
I love that you chose that word, to quality. Anybody who's ever read like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, there's Robert Pirsig in that book specifically talks about the word quality, and like he's talking about it from a philosopher's perspective of rhetoric, and that we assign a value of quality to something, and something has many qualities. And I think that this is a unique component to Asian medicine in general, is that rather than looking at just the descriptors of an object, meaning or a material or a part of the substance that you might be examining, they look at the qualities that those things present. For example, hot or cold or damp or dry, but also other qualities, vitalizing versus suppressing, yin and yang. And I think that that's an important element that you bring forward in that, in that discussion, because I think that one of the time, or many of the times that we in the West look at food, we don't really examine it in terms of its quality, other than how many calories does it give us? Does it give us high enough levels of protein? How many nutrients, etc.? But those are really cold, like you mentioned. They're mechanistic qualities. They're not qualities of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm looking at your website here, James, and it says Dao Holistic Wellness. This is so your organization is Dao Holistic Wellness, right?
Yeah, it's a sole proprietorship, so it's basically just me.
Okay, well, understood. It says that mission here, however, is Dao Holistic Wellness is based on the Chinese philosophy religion of Taoism. Taoism acknowledges the existence of, and am I saying this right, qi, with a CH, qi?
Yeah.
Which might be considered as the energy supporting life that allows for form and change to exist. Dao Holistic Wellness uses the modality of Reiki to support Qi and consultation services to establish harmony in your life. Dao Holistic Wellness aims to end suffering and bring about quality of living through application of wisdom and strategy. And the only reason I was getting a chuckle when you were talking about being a sole proprietor, because boy, aren't we all. It's right. Like everybody, Jeff is too, right, Jeff? But
yes, I am. Although to be fair, I'm actually in the business that I have with my wife as well, and she's both trained in both Chinese and Western herbalism, and so It's not really it's a partnership.
Yeah.
But it is a limited. It's not a corporate partnership.
Understood. Yeah, there's no the only papers were marriage papers. Is that kind of how it works? Right. So what's yours is mine, hon. But all right. So the kind of the impression I get from this mission statement here is that you probably also end up doing a lot of kind of life coaching type stuff as well, right? Where it's not just about the physical aspects of this. This is a holistic is the word you use. So you're looking at everything inside a person's life. So this is a philosophical thing for the person that sort of partakes this, right?
Yeah, it's about basically rebuilding someone according to a model that will upgrade their whole life. That's kind of what I want to do.
And I know a lot of it, and Jeff, you can interject here too, because both of you, I think, participate in this, right? But a lot of this is really just kind of helping people to kind of look at things, not that to look at things from a different viewpoint or a different way or a different angle, right?
Yeah, I definitely want people to have more awareness. And the reason why I wanted to talk about nutrition is I think that's a really good starting point to bridge someone's physical and spiritual grounding in themselves.
Jeff talks about this thing he did on a previous podcast about being mindfulness of what you're eating. So not just throwing food in your face because you're hungry, but being kind of cognizant of what you're eating, where it came from, like, and these kinds of things. And that's made a huge difference for me in the quality of the food that I throw in my face, for sure. It tends to be a lot less processed now and things like that. But nutrition is a much wider subject than just that, right? I mean, you're also kind of talking about balance and the types of food you eat and so forth as well. Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole system of digestion is a metaphor made matter for your intaking of information, your ability to assimilate it and excrete what is not useful.
Yeah, that's sort of how the biological process works, right?
Like everything your senses, they call it the five thieves in Taoism. That's all a form of eating and nourishing whatever they're observing.
So, give me an example of like someone that of what you would tell somebody to change, immediately, like an average person. What would kind of be your advice on those lines?
I would definitely say you want to get rid of things that are additives that are not food organic molecules. So proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and our micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and herbal special molecules like that. That's really all you want to be consuming. The preservatives and extra flavors, food coloring, all that is just kind of not food. Like, why do you want that in you?
I just think it's funny because there's this running joke. I work in the food and beverage industry, okay? And so I build the machines that make stuff. And I always think it's funny because strawberry, the strawberry that comes out of a processing plant does not taste anything like an actual strawberry. Like strawberries to kids don't taste like strawberries anymore. And it's because they have this like polluted sense of processed food, the flavor strawberry, and what it tastes like versus what an actual, pick it out of a field and eat it strawberry tastes like. You know what I mean? It's bizarre, but it's sort of a warped interpretation because of the way that we process food flavorings and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I personally like to cut down on GMOs. This is not really something that we've proven is harmful. In fact, there may kind of be a conspiracy trying to plug them into people. But I think in my gut, I prefer not to have them. And that just kind of comes from intuitive info.
Oh, there's a lot of people that feel that way today, especially things that have been like radioactively altered and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think, it's interesting. I think that from a Taoist perspective, there's on the philosophical level, there's this perspective that in the West that we have superior intelligence, and like we have somehow a superior intelligence to nature, and Taoists just don't buy into that. In fact, I was recently reading a passage that was kind of comparing, Confucius sent one of his disciples to talk to this Taoist guy, and he came back and he was all upset. He didn't understand this guy at all, and the Taoist. He didn't understand the Taoist at all, and so he asked Confucius about it. Confucius says, "Well, I made an error here by sending you." This is obviously paraphrased. I made an error by sending you. This is a man who lives in as a function of nature, and you live as a man within a function of human society. And so there was this, it's like you couldn't have possibly understood it. And I think that really points to something there that, the Taoist perspective very clearly points to this idea that nature is far more intelligent than we have ever given it credit for. And that when we start mucking about with it, we usually make something far inferior to it.
Yeah, totally. I also kind of have an aversion to the use of microwaves. I think that there's sort of a natural electric field that growing things and living things have. And the second they're in that microwave standing field, that's basically becomes incoherent. Like you've somehow lost the information.
I had a buddy tell me that one time too, that something about microscopes and water molecules or something like that after they've been put through a microwave, that it does something to the water molecules. I can't remember what it was now. I probably shouldn't have mentioned it. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
It's interesting, James. You and I are dead on the same way of this. I don't have microwave. I have not had one for nearly 30 years now. As I started to follow the Taoist path, I came to the same conclusion, and it was supported by one of my primary instructors, Dr. Hua, used to tell me all the time that microwave kills the chi of the food.
Right.
And so I just discarded it. And I was kind of already there. I occasionally would use it for like heating up popcorn and stuff, but now I don't even do that and haven't, like I said, for quite some time, because I have that same intuitive sense. And you can kind of, anybody who ever tastes microwave food as opposed to cooked in some other fashion,
right.
you can tell. You can tell it kills something.
It's arguably food anymore.
Right.
Rubber.
One could say that, just looking at it from a simple energy model and comparing it to the philosophical model of Taoism, it's almost like, in Taoist dietary perspective, like roasting something is one of the ways that you add the most heat, most fire to the food. And microwaving is sort of like, you're basically putting it on the sun. And so you've infused so much yang that you've separated out the yin entirely, and yin and yang have separated, so now there's no more qi.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense, because natural heat, it has a pattern. It's about rising up. And that's how like fire or conduction, something like an oven works. It's completely different from this agitation of molecules through the dipoles.
It doesn't have to go any further for me than what you guys were talking about, what we were talking about earlier, is in that if when you're eating something, it tastes synthetic or foreign, and you think about, that's that whole mindfulness of eating, right? So if what comes out of a microwave oven can't taste healthy to you, then you probably shouldn't be putting it in your face, at the very least, because of that connection, right? That alone is a reason not to do it. But there could be significant ramifications, as in how it may be molecularly altering things as well, right?
Well, I certainly think so.
Oh, yeah. I think molecules, like biochemistry, they're sort of like living molecules.
Yeah. Microwave ovens are probably the least destructive things that I do to myself personally, but, whatever. So
yeah, I mean, it's also not good to be hyper concerned about these things.
Right.
That's just another kind of illness.
I started eating better when I started actually cooking again. That makes a big difference too. When you actually cook your food from scratch and start doing that kind of stuff, definitely the quality of the food that I put in my face went up significantly, and I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. Cooking is a great practice. I kind of liken it to Weidon or external alchemy. When you cook, you're putting intention into it. There's this Buddhist view,
definitely,
that one thread of the garb is the whole Dharma. So in anything you cook, there is the Buddha nature. You're mixing up all the sentient beings, all the samsara gets cooked together.
That's tough too when you get, because where I fell apart was because I used to cook when I had all the kids at home and that kind of thing, and then when that changed, it was like, I got nobody to cook for anymore. So I lost like that connection with that process of food and eating, because it was a connection that I used to show my family how much I loved them by cooking them really yummy, scrumptious, nutritious things, right? But I didn't, so I had to kind of go back and re-find that connection again for myself, and saying, well, I want to feel better, and there's not a lot of things I will change about the terrible habits that I have, but that's one of them I certainly can, because it's easy because cooked food tastes way better. It just does. And when you cook things from scratch and stuff like that. So that, from a selfish point, it was very easy to make that kind of healthier decision for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're cooking all the ingredients of your life.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I think that James hit something really interesting and an important statement is that Weidon idea. Alchemy is a transformation. When you're cooking, you're transforming the food and putting it into your life. You're preparing it, this thing that has been from your perspective, anyways, your limited human perspective outside of you, and you're bringing it in to you, and you're connecting yourself. And I think that there's a very powerful spiritual act there, that you're acknowledging your connection to the web of life through that preparatory process. And not only are you changing the thing you're cooking, but you're changing yourself through the process.
It's funny that we've talked about this before on the podcast, but Jeff, I don't remember if it was with you or not, but this whole concept of personal alchemy, this is a kind of like a ideology that keeps popping up, and it pops up not just it pops up in Eastern culture, it pops up kind of all over the place, right?
It pops up everywhere, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some very good friends that are Western.
Even something in like American culture. There's always that special vibe to mama's or grandma's home-cooked meal.
Oh yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is because when I grew up, alchemy was the thing where the wizard was trying to turn lead into gold. And now, but that's not really what it is. Especially, alchemy is supposed to be looked at, from what I can understand, having read stuff as an adult, but it's about like it's about a personal transformation. It's a metaphor for transmutation, for turning yourself into something else. It's not just about the quest, and gold just being the precious item that people would pursue, is just a metaphor for yourself, right? So, and when it's looked at that way, it's everything about those stories take on completely different meanings. But that same sort of tenet has shown up. I mean, it's in Arthurian lore, right? It's all over the place. Those same messages, or those same, what am I saying here, Jeff? Archetypes.
Sure. Yeah. The Western, that metaphor you talk about in Western alchemy of the lead into gold, that even if you read any alchemy texts, which I have, Western alchemy texts as well as the Chinese, it's very clear that is a metaphor for the transformation of the soul and the spirit.
Okay.
To a higher state. Gold is associated with that, with divinity.
Right. That makes sense. Sure.
And lead is, and if you look at the alchemists table, if you were to take an alchemist's table of materials or matter, lead is sort of like the most earthy. It's the most material, the most base, and that we've translated that word base to meaning something bad, but it's not. It's just it's the most yin.
Okay.
Of the metals, and gold is like, when if to translate it into the Chinese vernacular, it's the divine fire within matter. So you've basically infused divinity into the most base material substance, so that it has transformed into something greater than its original nature.
That's a whole lot
and
of.
Also, sorry.
No, go ahead, James.
Go ahead.
Also, in the Taoist view, it's sort of a repeating process. Like, once you have the gold, it again is lead.
Right, because that's sort of the
You're
maddening part
never
of.
really complete. It's just a continuing thing of refinement and degradation,
Yeah.
compared to another higher ultimate.
Because isn't that the sort of the moral of the story, I guess, or the point is that the alchemist goes mad and never gets there. It gets really, really close a lot, kind of thing, right? Isn't that kind of how it worked out? So it's and in that is the metaphor. It's just something you just got to keep doing, and there's no such thing as turning lead into gold, kind of thing. But you got to keep pursuing it nonetheless.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to bring this all the way back to Taiji Chuan, since that's something James and I share too. in Tai Chi, one of the things that I've discovered over the nearly 30 years of practice of it is that no matter how refined my Tai Chi gets, I have just as much to work on as I always have. And I mean,
Right.
that is no exaggeration. I have students in my classes that will often, they comment or like, well, I'm never going to reach the perfection of this form like you are. And I'm like, well, if you think that I'm doing things perfectly, you're really missing the boat here, because that's not my experience. My experience is that I am constantly having to refine, and what happens, it's like your vision begins to include more. Like my perspective, I'm more aware of nuance. I'm more aware of possibilities, both of the mind and the body that's present in my form and in my practice. And as I'm going through these things, I can, you take an inch and you divide it in half, and you got a half an inch. You divide it again, and you can divide it infinitely in half. And that's basically what happens is, the somebody from the outside can't see the difference because you're, at 1/1,000,000th of an inch and you're dividing it in half, right? Because you've divided it in half so many times. But to you, the gap is still the same. You still have the gap.
Yeah.
Right.
And
You get all the closer, it seems all the farther away.
right. And that is an essential part of the teaching and the lesson, because that gives you the equanimity to step back and realize that it isn't about the goal, but it's about the process.
It's funny because it's same thing in I'll get a plug in here for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but the guys that you really look at and go, wow, that guy's amazing, and girls, when you ask them, how long did it take you to get good at it? They say, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah.
Because it's like the better they are, the more they understand what they don't actually know, kind of thing.
And can't actualize.
Right. It's kind of a weird, maddening pursuit, isn't it?
Well, that's mastery in general. I mean, the term mastery is we throw it around. We've got our ideas, cultural ideas around mastery, but the reality of it is something entirely different. I think, it's the recognition that there is a never-ending path for you, and that's exciting to me.
Let me take this back, James. At the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about in your journey that there was a point in time where it was the first point that you ever felt chi. Can you how did that manifest for you?
So we had been doing some qigong exercises. I think it was a 5-element qigong where we did pounding for earth, shaking for fire, snapping for wood. Metal is bending and water was like flowing around. And then we did standing meditation with your palms together and breathing and trying to feel the connection between the hands. And it definitely started to feel like a magnetic field, like that same feeling you get if you press bar magnets together.
So this was a profound point for you. This was a profound event then.
Right. I don't actually know if that is chi itself or if that's just one way it's being interpreted.
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of an individual thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Different types, all different kinds.
Sure.
Well, the classic writing on Taoism will say that you never really feel the chi, you feel the chi's result.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of James is getting at, is that, for him, this was his experience of it. And that was, I'll be honest with you, that was mine as well. But I've had others as well, and I'm sure you have since. And eventually, my experience of it anyways was that there's a point at which you kind of intuit the chi by the result you feel. And ultimately you start being able to kind of perceive it directly, even though there's nothing directly to perceive. And at least that's my experience.
Like finding causality kind of thing. You're
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So it did X and Y resulted kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to to articulate into words. I in my own, like in my practice, sometimes I can look at a person and I can see how the chi is in their body. I mean, I don't see, people will say, what do you mean you see the chi? It's not, I don't see lights or anything like that. It's just their body is what it is. And it's right there. It's there, it's their body is shaped the way it is. It's formed the way it is. It moves the way it does. It has hot and cold as it does because of the nature of the chi. And when you spend enough time practicing these kinds of contemplative and awareness-based practices, where you not only are learning to train yourself to experience the chi through your sensory perceptions, but you also train yourself to see what that means, and you look at it like a detective or a scholar that just really studies it. Eventually, over time, you kind of perceive past the limit of the organized forms, and you see what gives rise to it. And to describe it as sight is kind of not entirely accurate, because it isn't really sight. It's somewhat feeling. It's somewhat something else.
Okay.
And you're familiar with the idea of Jing or essence?
Oh yeah, well there's Jing there too, but no, I mean literally, like the Jing is less mobile. Like you don't see how, like that's more constant. At least that's my experience of it.
Now, one of the ways that you manipulate this, right, James, is through this process called a modality of Reiki. Okay, so that's a process where you are physically manipulating these energies, right? Kind of thing, or how does that work?
Well, I think with Reiki, the idea is that it's not even your own energy. You're just a channel for the ideal state.
But okay, so
like you're using something beyond yin and yang to immediately induce the change in whatever it is.
yeah, but this includes a process, right? Is this like a explain to me what this would be to somebody that doesn't, because I don't know what I'm looking at when I look at this what Reiki is. I think it's like some sort of healing thing, right? But I have very ignorant understanding of it.
Well, I mean, it is kind of mysterious. There is a procedure. You basically get an attunement from a Reiki practitioner or master, and then you're then able to channel Reiki to others.
Okay.
And you basically do the gasho hand position, like the praying position, and you intend for the Reiki to flow, and you use sort of a clairvoyance to feel someone's aura, and you move your hands over the areas you want to clear.
Okay. So it's sort of like and in that process you're doing what for the person that you're doing this for?
It's really kind of a mystery still, but I think it's kind of like you just rebuilt the whole thing in one go. Like you just emptied out the junk and replaced it with the true info.
Okay.
Someone lies down on a table and just relaxes while you do the process.
Okay. Is this something that people could look up, can look up and see videos of and stuff like that? Then is it something that's sacred, or is it something that's pretty out there and people can kind of get a sense for what it's about?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of following for it. It goes back to a single person lineage, so it's kind of a recent invention.
Okay.
But I've talked to one Taoist priest who said that they had similar practices that he had learned about.
Okay.
Yeah, I know of. There's a book that was written. I don't remember. I think it was in the 90s. There was a Taoist lineage of northern China that the practices are nearly identical to Reiki, and the perspectives. James, if I can find a link to that book, I'll send it your way. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, and unfortunately, I don't off the top of my head, but I can find it because I know where I saw it.
Going back to the talk where you asked me what should people reduce first.
Yep.
So we mentioned removing non-food ingredients. I think another really good step is to reduce dairy. And maybe this isn't true for everyone, but I've found dairy to be something that makes a lot of phlegm. They call it in Chinese medicine, which is a sort of sticky, turbid texture.
Okay.
Sort of like you don't want to exercise or move. You'd rather just kind of rot or melt and not be active. So phlegm kind of is oppositional to a healthy lifestyle.
Okay. For sure. It's definitely a nuisance. They make like a shit ton of over-the-counter medications because so many people have to deal with it, right?
Right. And dairy is, a lot of people are actually subtly allergic to it. And this is less common, I think, in Western, like Aryan, Caucasian genetics, but more common in Asian and Black.
It also seems like that when you look at other cultures, like Middle Eastern cultures and stuff like that, they use like goat's milk. And that seems to be a lot less harsh on people. And I think because molecularly or something like that, it's actually closer to like human breast milk than dairy, which has traditional dairy, which has much larger fat globules or something like that. So it's much harder for humans to process. So how do you feel about like that, like using like goat's milk instead of cow's milk and things for people as an alternative?
Yeah, I think goat's milk is in many ways better. I've definitely drank it and felt it to be more nourishing and less detrimental than cow's milk. And goat cheese is really tasty. You're kind of making me want goat cheese.
I actually have a close family friend that does it for people that have like cancer and that are on chemotherapy and different things like that. They can have goat's milk and it doesn't upset their stomachs as like regular heavy cow's milk is just too heavy for them. Even skim milk's too heavy for them, but they can do goat's milk. So I've had the luxury of having it, and I don't prefer it, but I do love like feta cheese and things like that. So I like the things that are made out of it. But as a poured on I don't like my cereal to taste like grass. And there's something about the aftertaste of goat's milk. It's like, I'm eating grass. I'm drinking grass. You know, it's very gamey that way. So I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I got you. Jeff, are you still there?
I am.
So do you do, in your Taoist diet, do you go for vegan or not really?
No, I do not. To be honest with you, one of the things that I've kind of been a I don't even know how to describe it. I've been for the last 4 or 5 years now, just training myself to listen to my body. So what I do is I literally ask my body what it wants and what it needs. And one of the things I do is I kind of I started this by, like, before I would eat, I would imagine eating the thing and I would listen to my body's response to that. And as I imagined eating it, I would listen to how my stomach would respond and the digestive energy and just how the chi system responded in general. And and then over time, what I started doing is just I started listening to, I'd give it a few options and I'd pick the best of the options and all that. And eventually it started to come to it started telling me what I wanted and what it needed. And so I kind of do that. And I find that over the years, I've gotten where I eat I don't eat wheat because it just doesn't agree with me in any way. My body never wants it. if I'm listening to my body, it tells me very clearly that it doesn't want that. But even grains a lot. I don't eat a lot of grains. If I do eat grains, it's generally rice, um, because I prefer that. Sometimes corn. My body's okay with that, and it doesn't ever really ask for it, but it is okay with it. But the thing that's interesting that my body probably wants more than anything is fish and vegetables, and it wants a lot of vegetables, not even fruit that much. And that's interesting because in the Taoist, the sort of one of the ideal Taoist diets is fruit, nothing but fruit. And but I've found that my body doesn't really want that, and maybe I just haven't transformed to a stage where that's ideal for me yet. And maybe that's the process. I don't know.
Yeah, fruit are definitely really quite young.
Yeah. Yeah,
Isn't
I think
there-
so.
There's a whole sort of ethos. I think there's a book, if I'm not mistaken, that talks about how you should eat your like heritage, like eat the diet of your of your
Ancestors, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, isn't that kind of Jeff? Do you think that that's kind of if you start being mindful of what your body needs, because depending on where you are predominantly from, it would, your diets varied greatly. So people evolved around the species and foods that were available wherever their lineage evolved from, right? So there's probably some merit to that, even genetically, wouldn't you say?
I would think so. I mean, I think that there's also an element, and there's a nod here to the Taoism too about where you live. Because you're plugged into a network of forces, that's all around you. You live there, and it's all. I'm a big believer of growing your own food. I grow as much of mine as I can. Living in New England, that's sometimes challenging because our growing season is wicked short here.
Yeah, wicked
Um,
short.
Yeah, I would love to be involved in that, growing your own food, because it's almost like that cooking metaphor, but
Right.
even more to the seed.
Well, yeah, you're dealing with the land and the energy, the chi of the land you're on, and if you're mindful about it, you start really getting the sense of how you need to treat the soil, but also the scraps of your food go back into it, and you really see the being part of the web of the life force itself that you're participatory in, and I appreciate that a lot. I'm also a big fan that if you're going to have, as a person who does eat meat of various kinds, I would really like to be a person who hunts his own. If I'm going to have meat, I would rather be a participant. That way, there's always that reverence. Some of that comes from probably my Native American heritage too.
Would you shoot
where-
with a gun, or would you try and do bow and arrow?
If I had my choice, man, it'd be a bow and arrow. If I had my choice, it would be a spear. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
realistic.
That's not
I'm
legal.
realistic
Yeah.
in that I'm not likely to chase something down with it.
I want to watch that happen, right?
I want to watch that
Get some
happen.
exercise too, yeah.
You run
Yeah,
through
no, I
the woods
would have
barefoot.
fun.
That's getting to be a big deal now, man, with people that are sort of feeling that way, Jeff, where they're like, if I'm going to eat an animal, then I'm going to take its life. Like, and not in the sense that, yay, kill, stuff like that.
Right.
It's more in, it's like you said, it's sort of a reverence for, I'm not going to have some nameless, faceless thing and doing this. It's going to be a part of, I'm going to take that on myself, and I'm going to take this other animal's life, and then I'm going to consume it. They want to be part of that whole process, and they feel that it connects them to the food on a much deeper level.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's where the impetus for me comes from, and people I know that are driven in that way feel the same way.
There's these lunatics. There's this dude named Cameron Haynes. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this guy. Who's a hunter, and they go, I mean, he's like legit hikes into 10 miles, 20 miles in, and hauls out it's like for him, he works, that's how he gets all of his food or all of his meat, is he goes and does it that way. Like the traditional, it'd be about as close to Native American way of doing things that I think you could probably get. And he's got like a huge following now, people that are really starting to kind of get into this sort of, way of doing this connecting with their food this way. So it's like gardening, but on a more animalistic level, I guess, right? It's that same sort of connection with your food source.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many people even know like the source of food, like if they even comprehend farms and like the process that goes into that.
Yeah, it's an industry. It absolutely is an industry, and it's been turned into that. And yeah, man, I've seen documentaries and stuff on like the people down, especially it happens a lot in the southern states with the pig farms and what they're doing with all of this waste. They spray it up in the air to get to dehydrate it, basically to get the fluids out of it. But that stench and smell just, it just goes on for miles. And those people have to live close to this kind of stuff. But it's very much an industry. I started sourcing like my meat from, well, my sister's farm specifically.
Oh, nice. Lucky you.
Yeah. So, all of us kids, we all kind of get in together, and she raises, as many cows as we need, as many pigs as we need, as, that kind of thing. And it's all like, no stress, farm raised kind of stuff, and it tastes different. It definitely does. There's no doubt about it than regular like industry processed type meats and things. So you can tell in the quality of the lifestyle of the animal. It comes across in the flavor.
Oh, I know what you mean. I usually try and get some like grass fed or go for the farms that I don't know. Sometimes I just have a feeling from like the label in the package, even just like, oh, this meat's better. This one, nah.
There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there's a lot of farms I'm noticing now that are starting to pop that up where you can kind of come in and at the beginning of the season, they do it cyclically, but you can be like, I'm going to buy half of this animal, and then that animal is raised on that farm, and then when it becomes mature, you get the phone call and you come pick your meat up. So does it cost more? Yeah, it does, but it's not much more than you think it would be. It's not even that expensive. The trick is you got to have a place to store that kind of volume. And that's where everybody runs into a problem. Is nobody does deep freezers and stuff like that hardly anymore. But you got to have a place to put it after you get it butchered.
Yeah, my teacher actually recommended that. The one who taught me a lot about nutrition.
Yeah, getting closer to your source of your food is not a bad idea anyway. But to Jeff's point, I think there's a lot to that sort of plugging into regionally grown things, and we see that with allergies and stuff, right, Jeff? I mean, in like honey, when you buy honey can help you with allergies, from what I understand, but you got to get the stuff that's actually from honeybees and things that are in your area, or it doesn't work.
Yeah, I've heard there's actually sort of immune resistant qualities you can get if you eat your local honey. It can prevent you from catching like certain illnesses in the area.
Helps you with the local allergies kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
Did we lose you, Jeff? Are you still there?
Yeah, I think he lost connection.
Oh, he dropped off? I didn't notice. Okay, cool. So covering nutrition and stuff like that. I mean, what else you said you had some stuff prepared you wanted to make sure we talked about tonight. We covered nutrition. What was the other one?
Oh, yeah, we kind of just got into everything I put down and everything I know, but I definitely liked being on the show and think I'd like to do more if you want to have me again.
Yeah, sure, man. This is kind of what we do. And I like doing the panel things too. I hope you're cool with that. That's, sort of fun having multiple people on. And that works out well. Skype has been great for that. So, yeah, man, certainly. And I'd probably have you come on with like Sherfu or something like that in the future too, as well. If you're interested. He's a really cool guy, and I got to give him another shout out because actually I'm going to be talking to him tomorrow. We're doing another show tomorrow with him and another guest.
Oh, awesome.
So got another show coming out for that. So, well, cool, bud. I appreciate you taking the time and, kind of hanging with me here on the phone and talking about, again, that's Dao Holistic Wellness, and you can find that by its name on Facebook, in the Facebook group. So check that out. James Shaffer Tien, thanks for joining me on the show tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time, buddy. Check us out there, www.noshitcast.com. with all the links and stuff on there for any place that you want to consume podcast media. Hit the likes and subscribes. We appreciate the shares, folks. It helps us out a lot. And we'll catch you all next time. Thanks for listening. Bye, Sickles.